G'day there, legends. For the first time in a long time, welcome back to the channel, everyone, and congratulations to all of you gorgeous humans. You've all done it. You found the champ dog. Well, it's certainly been a minute, hasn't it? And I have been on some adventures since I saw you all last. We'll get to that later. Been meaning to sit down and have a chat with you guys for a while about something, and today, after months of procrastination, I'm finally going to jump in there. But first, there's something that we haven't been able to do in a while, and it's going to be the highlight of your day. Grab yourself a mug, grab yourself a cup, fill it with your favorite drink. Here's to you. So I just want to clarify right from the start, I'm not here to just rag on TwilioQuest. I actually think it's a great tool, it's a great resource to have access to, but I just wanted to highlight some of the issues that I found while using it, which might also be issues for a lot of other people, and sort of highlight some of the ways it's not an ideal resource for a complete beginner, which is a little disappointing because it is something that is very appealing to a complete beginner. For those who don't know, TwilioQuest is a free game designed to teach people real-world coding skills. The game provides and links to a number of resources to help players learn different coding languages, and then presents them with a series of challenges to allow them to practice the skills that they're developing. Throughout the game, TwilioQuest provides links to a lot of external resources, such as this JavaScript reference at MDN WebDocs, and even other tutorials and learning tools similar to this W3 School's JavaScript tutorial. Giving players access to a range of resources and tools is of course a great idea, but it creates problems. It can become quite taxing when you're trying to learn something if you're having to jump between the game, back to a website, onto a different tab, try to make sense of it in a tutorial, read a reference document. And because the game relies on these, it creates an obstacle to the learning process and can get quite confusing. Another issue I encountered is that some of these documents aren't particularly user-friendly, and I'll show you what I mean. So let's take a look at this JavaScript reference document. You see here there's a lot of links, a lot of headings, and a lot of terms. And if you don't understand what some of these things mean, you probably already get my point. A complete beginner won't understand a phrase like fundamental object. What is an error object? What is big int? What is regexp? What's an array? Now, you can go and search for the particular thing that you're looking for, which is fantastic. But once you get into these things, you're going to be confronted with more terms you don't understand. What's a primitive? A complete beginner is not going to understand this document, and it's going to create a considerable barrier to entry for them. Within the game itself, TwilioQuest also uses a lot of these technical terms and bits of jargon, and of course it's important that a learner be exposed to the correct name for things, but without sufficient explanation, it can become quite confusing. And then when you're thrown into an external resource that doesn't offer any extra explanation itself, and when you try to learn more about something relies on more terms that you're unfamiliar with, it can become quite demotivating and feel a bit like you're being locked out of understanding a topic. But the bigger problem that I found is that the conventions and assumptions in TwilioQuest are different to those in JavaScript reference documents or the tutorials that they point you towards to practice. What do I mean by that? So TwilioQuest has a certain way that they define and name their variables. As a complete beginner, I don't necessarily know what is a variable or what's just a random arbitrary name, and that isn't particularly well explained in TwilioQuest. So when I jump into a tutorial, when I jump into one of these reference documents, and they are using different names to explain things, I don't necessarily understand, oh, we're talking about the same thing, just in this site they're using a different name for it. To a complete beginner, that is not intuitive at all. You just say, oh, but I was looking at this thing, and now on this page that they've linked me to explain it, they're talking about something else. And I found I often didn't understand the connection between the two. I'd often get confused where variables were given similar names, and I wasn't sure if there was a convention to naming things that I wasn't aware of. On top of that, Twilio Quest is introducing concepts to you in a particular order. But when you go to one of these external resources, say one of the tutorials, that tutorial will not be presenting things to its audience in the same order. So the assumptions in Twilio Quest of what you know and what you'll understand are different to the assumptions in that tutorial. So I often found myself going over to one of those websites to try to understand a problem, and that website would be referring to other things that I didn't understand, either because I hadn't covered it or it had been covered in a different context using different phrases and presented to me differently. And as a complete beginner, I didn't understand enough and I didn't have a firm enough grasp of the concepts to be able to make the leap from one context to the other and be like, okay, this thing is that thing. This all leaves Twilio Quest feeling a little incohesive. And as I said, it can quickly get confusing for a beginner. Now, of course, I'll qualify all of this by saying some of this was also my approach. I was trying to record the playthrough, and so I didn't really want to stop and spend a lot of time playing around with each concept, reading up on all of the reference documents, trying all of the challenges in the tutorial. I would try when I got stuck, but as much as possible, I was trying to do just enough to get through the challenge in the game and keep playing the game. So certainly I limited myself in that sense. But at the same time, I often did go to those external resources and just found them not particularly helpful and difficult to use because of those differences in naming conventions and assumptions of what we knew. I felt like a lot of things weren't particularly well explained. Because of the reliance on external resources, it meant there was less time devoted in the game to explaining things and exploring them in detail. And of course this makes sense, but as we've spoken about, jumping between different sources where things are named and approached differently makes it feel a bit incohesive. And even if you go to these external tutorials, I found a lot of those exercises were very similar. They'd give you one chance or maybe two chances to play around with something. So you don't really get to try it out in a few different contexts from a few different angles and really understand something before you need to layer on to that with the next concept that you're introduced to. Of course, the challenges themselves in the game are meant to function as practice and as an indicator of whether or not you're understanding something. And it's a brilliant setup, and I love that. But for a complete beginner, a little bit more time spent on each concept would probably be helpful. It'd be nice to be able to approach a concept from a few different angles, where the variables are named a few different things, where you have to do several different exercises using the same sort of functions, features, or concepts so that you can really understand it before moving on. One particular experience that I had was that the game would provide you with a series of instructions or data to work into your code in order to test if things were working so that you could get a predictable output. But then in another stage of the game, it would give you some code or instructions to enter into a command terminal or PowerShell or something like this. And there's not really a clear explanation in that challenge that, okay, this is actually an instruction for you to type into your terminal. Don't put this into your code. So of course I ended up just putting it into the code and it broke it and nothing worked. And it was incredibly frustrating for me at the time because I didn't know what was going on. I eventually reached out for help and someone explained to me, oh, that's actually a command you meant to type into PowerShell. But obviously up until that point, I had not understood that from what was presented to me in the game. It was poorly explained and it led to me being frustrated and feeling like I wasn't understanding something. I also felt a certain amount of aimlessness, both on the part of myself and Twilio Quest, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So Twilio Quest is trying to teach you to code. What it's not clear about is why, what the end goal is. But what I found in some other tools and resources that are available is that they'll tell you we are teaching you coding skills to help you get into web development, to build websites, or we are going to help teach you these skills so that you can get into software development or programming, or we're teaching you this so that you can start to develop mods for games that you love. There's a clearly defined goal, there's a clearly defined scope, and they've put together a curriculum to build towards that specific goal. And Twilio Quest doesn't really do that in my experience. And on my part, I was also a little bit aimless. I myself didn't have a clear goal while I was getting into this. And for someone else who does have a very clear purpose for why they want to learn to code, that first point may not even be an issue. If you know what you want to do and why you want to do it, this probably isn't going to hold you back. But for me, I was just kind of like jumping in there, getting my toes wet, mucking around, wanted to learn some coding just as like a little side project. And I was checking out this game and I was making these YouTube videos, but none of them were with a clear goal or end state in mind. It was just like a little side hobby while I was working and also studying, and I just fit it in when I could, but didn't if I didn't feel like it. Having that sense of purpose and structure can really help you to forge ahead at times when you don't want to or it's difficult. It can help with your motivation. Twilio Quest doesn't really give you that, and I didn't really bring it myself. So it was just very easy for me to not do something or not try that little bit harder to understand a problem because, why was I doing it anyway? One particularly frustrating experience I had playing Twilio Quest was with the dusty old chest challenge, which just doesn't seem to work the way it's meant to. I wasn't the only one struggling with this particular challenge. A quick search over on the Twilio Quest Discord showed several people having the same problems as well. For whatever reason, in this challenge, the same code doesn't function the same way for all users. While searching online to try to find a solution to the dusty old chest challenge, I found someone had completed the challenge successfully with identical code to what had just failed for me. And later, I was eventually able to pass the challenge through copy-pasting code that had not worked for the person who wrote it. Those of you who've seen that video know I wasn't particularly happy by the time I finished the challenge.
Okay, so I've managed to get past it and I'm deeply dissatisfied. And the way I've passed this is actually copy-pasting somebody else's code in, saving it, and it's worked. And this guy said that it actually didn't work for him, even though it's worked for other people. So there's something up there. I'm finding this really frustrating and deeply unsatisfying. As a complete outsider, as someone who's trying to use this program for its intended purpose, to learn from nothing, to learn with no experience and no basis, I don't understand what's going on, and I don't understand why they're giving me things that seem to be false.
That rant lasted the better part of half an hour. Now, of course, there's a lot of great things about Twilio Quest as well. It's free, which is fantastic, of course. Being in a game format creates a sense of excitement, enticement, and reward in a way that doesn't exist in a lot of other platforms. This game got me started in and interested in coding in a way that I probably wouldn't have through another platform. And there's a really helpful community on Discord. I mentioned earlier in this video that I'd had problems with a particular challenge. And going on to Discord, within a couple of hours, I had an answer from a dev who happened to be online. And as much as I said earlier that it can feel a little bit aimless and that's how I went into it, in some ways this is actually a good starting point for someone who doesn't have a firm goal, because you might feel reluctant to sign up for a course that's specifically for web development or specifically for programming if all you really want to do is get a little first taste of what coding might be like. And of course it's fun, the graphics and the music are quite charming, and it just makes the whole experience a little bit more pleasant than just going through an online tutorial. I didn't actually stop coding once I stopped playing Twilio Quest though. I spent a bit of time over at Khan Academy going through their JavaScript animation course, and ultimately I decided this was something I wanted to pursue further, and I've recently enrolled in a bootcamp, which has been keeping me pretty busy. However, this has all exposed me to a few other resources that people watching this video might be interested in. Of course, you already know about Twilio Quest. We've just been talking about it. I'm sure a lot of you know about bootcamps. Now, these aren't for everyone, but I'm finding it really helpful. There are a lot of similar options available for free online. Two particularly I'd like to draw your attention to is Free Code Camp and the Odin Project. I'm a little more familiar with the Odin Project, but both of these are effectively the content of a bootcamp made available for free online. The Odin Project in particular seems quite appealing to me, and I actually have used it on and off in support of my learning in the bootcamp. It's very well structured, very clearly laid out. You have some options over what you're learning, and they also spend a lot of time setting you up for success by going through some resources on learning how to learn and why to learn and how to ask constructive questions and where to find other people in the web development community online so that you can ask questions and get support that you need. It seems like a great resource, and so far has been covering a lot of the things that I've been covering in the bootcamp. So, I said earlier in the video that I'd go over some of what's been going on since I've last been active on the channel. The first and biggest thing is that I've signed up for a bootcamp in web development, which has kept me incredibly busy. But I've also had some technical issues with my computer. If you've been following the channel for a while, you probably know that every few months I talk about having some kind of technical issues with my computer. Well, I eventually got fed up with it and sent it back to the manufacturer. Turned out it needed a new motherboard, which has been replaced, and I've just got it back. But I haven't really had time to set everything up to start recording, or even a lot of time to play games, because my bootcamp has been keeping me so busy. In related news, this seems like a good time to tell you all, I've launched another YouTube channel, where I'll be focusing on my tech-based pursuits. Anything like this Twilio Quest playlist will live over there from now on, and I'll be going through some other games that I've found to help people learn coding or other helpful skills, and a bunch of other resources that I found, and anything else that I feel like covering in the tech field. Of course, I'll have links to the new channel, to some of the resources I mentioned in this video, and to Twilio Quest in the description for this video. That's all for this video, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. I know it's been ages since I've spent any time with you. I really appreciate you coming by. As always, you stay brilliant. I'm going to catch you real soon.